Coming to you from the Windy City. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop, a podcast about all things cloud and enterprise tech. Listen to insights and guest interviews with IT thought leaders and professionals. Now, here's your host, Vikas Ganoorkar.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Let's Talk Shop. Now, not too long ago, I did a video on the VMware Broadcom acquisition. And to be honest, I didn't think that video was going to have so many views, so many comments. That video is still going. Still, I get comments on it. I'm still getting questions about it. I'm getting direct messages about it. People want an update on that video. I'm not really sure how to update it. Broadcom's still acquiring VMware, folks. That hasn't changed. So one of the ways that I thought would be interesting to kind of address this topic from a different angle is to go back into my roots. Now, I used to be a consultant for a very long time. A lot of you know this. And I'm like, who better to talk about this topic than one of the largest consulting firms in the world? So it is my great pleasure to have IBM Consulting on the podcast to talk specifically about some of the topics of VMware, Broadcom, revirtualization, some of the other trends that they're seeing out in the marketplace. So Vikas, thank you so much for joining the show. Tell us a little bit about what you do for IBM Consulting.
Thank you, first of all, Eli, for having me on this session. Pleasure to be here. I've read or heard your video that you were talking about, right? So very interesting insights. Just as a quick introduction, I work for IBM Consulting within IBM, the bigger IBM family. My role is of a senior partner. I am responsible for the cloud migration business within IBM Consulting. And I do that in a global capacity based out of Dallas, Texas. The VMware Broadcom conversation is something which is very, very close to our hearts. Every client, I was going to say every second client, but now every client is actually wanting to understand more. They've done a lot of work, and we'll talk more about it. As well as I think every partner that we work with is also having a point of view on what should happen, in this space, and how they can actually help clients and maybe take advantage of the situation also a little bit, right?
Yeah, of course. Someone's troubles is always someone's opportunity, and in consulting, that's always gold. But so let me maybe start at the beginning before we talk about the specifics of what are the options and all of that. Tell me first, if you were to take a step back from the conversations you're having with customers, potential customers with the industry, what are you hearing? Like, I know there's a lot of disgruntled folks. There's a lot of folks that are unhappy. So I know that for sure, but what's going on? Are people actively trying to move away from VMware? Are they finding a solution? Is it a hybrid? Before we get into the specific, give me just a high level overview of what you're seeing. What's the temperature out there like?
Okay. So I think that's a very important point, right? Because a lot of this, I would say, you said go back, right? I think started early in the year, January, right? When I guess the first time the clients started seeing the new price bills, if you may, right? Or the communication from Broadcom came out on this is the new pricing model, this is the new licensing approach, right? Moving away from the perpetual to subscription. We all know about that, right? I would say, Eli, that I'll break it into two parts, right? The first 3 months were very exploratory, I would call them, right? Clients had just heard about it. They had no idea what's happening, right? It was like a sticker shock that they got, right? And the first instinct for many of the clients was, I can't do this. Where do I find the budget from, right? This is too much. I'm not prepared for it. I had no heads up. How can I get out of this? And what are the options I have, right? So a lot of those were very trying to just understand the lay of the land, right? Was the first 3 months, I think, was what I have seen. Since then, in the last 2.5 months, I think we are seeing a gradual trend of many of these clients have figured out, right, what the situation is. They've also taken stock of where they are and what their sort of, landscape is, more with the lens of, if I have to move out, do I have, how easy is it, or how quickly can I do it? And I think where we are at this point of time, I get a view that most clients, most bigger clients at least, are not looking to do this in a hurry, right? If they are up for a renewal, they are renewing, right? They're biting the sort of cost in some form or shape, and then also using the time to strategize on what should my new target operating model be, right? You spoke about the word revirtualization, right? If it's on prem, what should that on prem world look like, the virtualization world look like, right? With VMware, or maybe even with other sort of options that are available right now. And then obviously there is this whole conversation about clients who've always already decided, right, that they will want to accelerate their move to the cloud. This is just one more trigger which is actually leading them to see, can we work with AWS, Azure, IBM Cloud, GCP, all the other providers that are there, and see if that motion can be accelerated. So
So
that's where we are seeing.
yeah, and I think that's a fantastic overview, and something that you said caught my attention. I think it's cautious from enterprises to basically bite the bullet, get some breathing room, understand what's going on, understand what their options are. How would you compartmentalize? How would you bucketize customers? So if I were to say, give me a percentage of customers that understand what's going on, that are disgruntled, but are, hey, it is what it is, we accept it, and are not looking to make any changes. They're happy with the way it is, and it is what it is. They're gonna pay whatever premium it is. Would you say that's 5 to 10%, less than 5%? Is it more?
I think it's about 15%, 10 to
Okay.
15%, right, of the clients who are basically saying, I'm going to accept it as it is, and move on as if nothing has happened. And there are multiple reasons for it, Eli, but I think the bulk of the clients are in the category of, for different reasons, right? Some clients have actually become even emotional about this, right? Of, I don't want to be held at a gunpoint, right? Because many of them have viewed this as almost something that was done without any heads up or any sort of awareness. So it's a little bit of that, and then I think many clients are being more rational, right, about this is what it is, right? They also understand that moving from, a perpetual to a subscription license will mean an increase in cost, right? But then that also means that they have now got the opportunity to see if there's a better way to optimize.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I would say that the larger category is of the latter, right? To say that, okay, now that this has happened, do I, it's an opportunity for me to see how I can actually reshape my business.
Okay, so we've got 15% that are basically just going to stay put. They're going to try to optimize whatever they can within what they have. Maybe, get an inventory of the services, VMs that they're using, services that they're using, and just optimize what they currently have. So that's one end of the extreme. I would say, what's the other end of the extreme? If we were to put a percentage on those, because I want to talk about the middle, but I want to talk about the extreme first. So one extreme is, hey, we're not doing anything. We're just going to optimize with what we have, and we're going to stay with VMware. It is what it is. The other side of the extreme that basically says, nope, I've had it. I'm getting off of VMware completely. So whether that's OpenShift, whether it's Nutanix, whatever it is, the other side of the extreme, is that another 15% or is it more?
I think that's definitely about 25 to 30%, right?
Okay.
Of clients who are basically saying, and again, we have multiple alternatives, right? Bulk of that is really around, let me move everything to cloud, right? And that cloud conversation is becoming extremely, I mean, important all over again, right? Everyone knows about this, right? This is not a new topic of conversation, but I think what has happened with this particular move has just created one more trigger to sort of see how we can actually have clients move over. I think it's also about the the other pattern I'm seeing is, because a lot of these on-prem workloads have been on the data center, right? It's also a great opportunity for clients to say, there's capex, opex that I'm actually having because of data center expenses, right? I could actually combine this move to cloud and get rid of a lot of the cost and expense that I have in my existing data centers. Many clients I know are actually they were already at the peak of their data center utilization, right? And again, they've been sort of contemplating, should I move to another data center, right? Should I go to a colo? And again, this is just like, okay, I know what I need to do now, right? Let me move to the cloud.
Okay. And then you have probably the biggest bulk or the biggest portion of folks that that have accepted kind of what you're saying. They're accepting a hybrid environment of some sort. They're going to move some to the cloud. They're going to keep some on-prem. So that on-prem could be VMware. It could be some other re-virtualization, but they've accepted that sort of hybrid environment. Now, from a consulting perspective, if I am a customer and I'm listening to you, and I'll come to IBM Consulting and basically say, hey, I am not happy with what's going on, but I'm not really sure which direction to go. How do you help customers? What is the methodology that you would use to help customers arrive at, hey, you know what? You're a good option for hybrid, or you know what? You're a good option for completely get off of VMware, or based on what we've seen, you guys should just stay within VMware and optimize. Like, how do you help them make the choice of strategy?
Sure. So there are two broad spectrums of engagements that we are seeing with clients, right? One, because of what you said, right, is clients who are wanting help with what should be my future state model and what should the strategy be, right, for what I do. Uh, there, from a consulting perspective, Eli, we already have, and we've had this sort of, for a while, and our conversations with most clients is we have a hybrid by design strategy, right? Which essentially dovetails with the word that you said, right? That we realize and recognize that most of our clients will need a hybrid model, right? And that hybrid model now kind of, expands across the stack, right? So far we have spoken about hybrid cloud, right? Which is, hybrid and multi-cloud. We are now also talking about a hybrid and multi-virtualization sort of, layer as well, right? In the context of Broadcom VMware. So that's one. And
Well,
we are
what is hybrid and multi virtualization? Is that multiple hypervisors, basically?
Yes, it could be multiple options, right? So we are seeing multiple clients actually say, I mean, last week I was in a meeting with one of our clients who basically said that they have 50,000 VMs, for example, right? They have a cloud that they're using, but they also want to sort of look at an on-prem estate largely.
Mm-hmm.
And in that conversation, what turned out was while they're evaluating Red Hat OpenShift, which is obviously our product, right?
Sure.
And that's also one of the reasons why we were on this sort of discussion table. But then the other conversation was, I'll look at Nutanix as well, right? So we're working with Nutanix also to sort of position ourselves. But then they also sort of realize that there is a certain percentage of workloads that they don't want to move off VMware for now, right? So they will probably continue, and that's my sort of hybrid multi sort of virtualization layer, right?
Mm.
That they'll probably not move off completely from VMware. May not make sense. It's probably more risky, right? It could end up kind of being more expensive, and that's the level of detailing that is happening at this point of time. So the trend that I'm seeing is from an initial exploratory stage that I was talking about, where clients are just wanting to understand what the hell have I gotten myself into, to okay, now I know where I need to go. How do I sort of make sure that I have a very clear, distinct mapping of which workloads map to what, what option, both from a cost, TCO, ROI sort of standpoint. There is an element of risk. We can get into lots of details around that. It's about skills and talent availability. It's about the kind of support model that is available, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the strategy part. Going back to your earlier question, right?
Yep.
The second part is really, lots of clients saying, I've made a decision, right? Now I want a migration partner who I can rely on, who could help me with the execution. And there are a lot of conversations that clients are doing to assess the right vendor or the right partner is, what do you bring to me, right? And mostly understand that this is a new, I mean, this is a net new spend item, right? There is very limited business or monetary value that they're getting out of this. So they're very keen to understand that if I'm working with you, IBM Consulting, what are you bringing on the table which helps me with a higher degree of automation, a more asset-driven approach. And that's the second pivot that we have, Eli, right? Within consulting, we are rapidly moving our business from what has been a largely labor arbitrage driven model in the services industry to more of an asset or technology arbitrage model, right? And you probably seen a lot of analysts start to talk about it. We are already leading that space, right? And in that construct, we've already launched what we call as the migration factory, which is powered by our GenAI assets and assistants. right? The idea being that with these Gen AI assets and assistants, we are able to bring in a lot more productivity benefits and gains, and correspondingly, the clients see a significant reduction in terms of the price that they will pay for that particular service, but also accelerate the timeline that they're looking for. And it fits in very nicely with this example, right? Because this topic is all about, once I've made a decision, how quickly can you actually help me do it? Because the more time you take, it's increasing risks, it's increasing cost, and so on and so forth. So that's the two spectrums.
Yep. I have a bunch of things I'll ask you about the AI in general and Gen AI in particular, but a little bit later on. But
Yeah.
so, okay. So from a consulting perspective, you're IBM Consulting. Does that mean you're only going to push IBM products like IBM Cloud and OpenShift? Or are you pushing, like, if the solution, like if it's in the best interest of the customer to have Nutanix and have Google or AWS, you're still operating as a independent consultant, although you have the IBM banner, or is it IBM first?
So that's a great question, and I get asked this question quite a lot of times, right? Although it's become lesser and lesser over time, but the consulting organization within the IBM bigger IBM family is really agnostic to technology, right? We lean in with obviously our own products, right? And technology, Red Hat is one of them, for example, IBM Cloud is the other one. But we go and meet clients where they are in terms of their existing sort of landscape, their preferences, their choices, and what works for best for them. And in that context, we've also established a fairly robust business with partners and ecosystems, and these partners and ecosystems are AWS, Azure, Google. There's a significant amount of business that we actually do with AWS, Azure, GCP, and Oracle Cloud Infrastructure at this point of time amongst hyperscalers, while obviously IBM Cloud is also one of the important ones. I will also say in that same breath, Eli, that Broadcom and VMware is also a partner of us, right?
Of
So
course.
we obviously work with them also, and for a for the clients who are wanting to stay on Broadcom and VMware, our approach is, yes, we'll help you with that also. But again, it's just about understanding the landscape and clients' preferences, not imposing what I have on the truck, right? Because I have everything on the truck, right? It's really pulling out what the client wants, right, in that particular context, and making sure that they are happy with what they get.
Sounds good. So clearly, you guys have a good partnership with Broadcom VMware. Broadcom VMware are both great software makers, and I've used their products for a very long time. Love the product. So for customers that want to stay within that, or even expand to a hybrid within that kind of ecosystem, you can help. For those that are trying to maybe do something else, what are the options? Let's start with on premises. What are the options? Is it just OpenShift and Nutanix? Does AWS Outposts have any play here? Is Azure Stack a consideration? So on premises, if you were to give me, I don't know, top 5 from what you're seeing, what are those options?
So I'll name the top three, right? Because that's where we have seen the
Fair
bulk
enough.
of the conversations, right? On the on-prem space, and that's largely, we go with Nutanix, Red Hat OpenShift, right? And then we've seen Dell Apex kind of being a bit,
Oh,
part of
okay.
conversation as well, and then obviously we have our own hyper converged infrastructure like IBM Fusion and Linux One and so on. So there are some of those options that we have, which we are seeing most clients start looking at. Some of them are industry specific, right? But the bulk of the pattern is really in those spaces, I
Okay.
would say.
So at this point, and you brought up a couple of really interesting points at the beginning of the conversation. So we're familiar with the hybrid, and we're familiar with multi-cloud. We're familiar with hybrid multi-cloud, but now there's this hybrid multi-visor, let's call it. There's too many moving parts. Are you seeing customers gravitate more towards consulting for initial deployment and then some kind of managed service? Or is it just consulting and day 2 they take over again? Like, because it's just too many things. So I'm curious how you're seeing that.
It's a mixed bag. I think in most cases where clients already have a large sort of workforce that they have, right, they're essentially leaning on to us for helping with the initial strategy and design, get the execution done. There's a client we are actually closing a deal this month where they basically said, they have a 1.5 years migration plan. Their their engagement model that we are having with them is the first 9 months we will sort of be on the driver's seat, if you may, right? And their staff will sort of shadow, because a lot of this is also about, as I said, talent, reskill, and sort of all of that. So we are helping them through the journey of how do you reskill, how do you upskill. As consulting, we've done this sort of for a living ourselves, right? We have
Sure.
uh, hundreds and thousands of employees and practitioners ourselves. So and then in the latter part of that contract, right, we basically sort of going to do a transition where the client is sort of client staff is going to take the sort of driver's seat, if you may, and then we will sort of be there to just make sure that they're able to sort of do this in a more seamless manner. So it's a high, again, I know this is becoming sort of catchy, but this is again a hybrid model of engagement that we are sort of working with.
So,
Um,
sorry, go ahead.
no, no,
Finish your
you go
thought.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so we talked about hybrid a lot, and you're right. Everyone keeps bringing up hybrid and multi-cloud and hybrid, multi-cloud, and all these terms. So you mentioned at the beginning also that you deal with cloud migrations and this whole cloud transformation. And obviously, all the conversation we've had today kind of leads to that in one way, shape, or form. So, if I were to ask you, what are some of the lessons learned on cloud migration hurdles? What are some of the biggest hurdles, some of the biggest lessons learned that you maybe can share with customers, so that maybe they can avoid them or they could leverage you potentially to avoid them? But as you're doing all of these, what are some of the lessons learned that are emerging?
So, Eli, I think the lessons learned are not going to be fundamentally very different, right? It's about, I guess, the first step is understanding and assessing the current state and being a fairly clear vision of what the target state needs to look like, right? For any transformation, I think those are the sort of foundational or foundational pillars, I would say. I guess the other big important thing that we always talk about is assessing complexity and risk associated with it, and ensuring that we have a mitigation plan for it, right? Because a lot of times we tend to sort of go uh, gung ho about, okay, we know what we need to get done, right? Let's just sort of focus on the execution. And I'll give you an example. A
Yeah,
lot of
please.
times internally also there is this whole conversations that happen, is lift and shift a great strategy, right? Or is should we look at just modernization? And I don't think there is one or the other answer, right? It needs to be sort of fit for purpose, right? There are certain requirements, there are certain situations where lift and shift is actually a better strategy, right? And likewise, so a lot of those things are extremely important, right? The talent and skill aspect is another big component that clients generally need to be careful for and plan for. You spoke about the what do you do day two onwards, right? The one part is take you from source to target, right? And kind of get that done. But then many clients are obviously seeing that and this is a even broader conversation, right? They've done early adoption from on-prem to cloud. Now they're sort of seeing the expense on cloud is sort of much more, right? So now they're basically even having conversations. We are starting to see a lot of opportunities on cloud to cloud migration, right? So I've moved on one cloud, now I want to move to another cloud because maybe my spend is going to be lesser, which then brings to the point of this whole FinOps, AIOps not being a day two conversation, right? Start doing it at day one or day zero itself, right? Because
But so I got to interrupt. So are you seeing a lot of that? Because that's always been something fascinating for me. So jumping between clouds, that's really hard to do unless you're just dealing with containers, virtual machines, and data. But if you're using PaaS services, that becomes more difficult. So you're seeing a lot of customers do that?
we are starting to see an increase of that, right? So I would say that at this point of time, I have at least 10 different clients where the conversation is, and I'll not name the clouds, right?
Sure,
But
sure, of course.
I am on one cloud. I now need to sort of move to another cloud, and I would say that there are certain providers who have become very aggressive. I mean, one of the newest entrants, as we all know, is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, right? They're becoming very competitive in their own space as well, right? And I think what they're doing with programs like Oracle Database at Azure and at GCP is really creating an Uber kind of a version, within the sort of hyperscaler space as well, right? So there are attractive options that clients are getting now, right? And they're willing to sort of explore that, right? So it's not no longer just an on-prem to cloud conversation. It's cloud to cloud as well.
So you mentioned risk assessment. So when you're doing a risk assessment for customers to help them with this, is the risk assessment done at an application by application level? Hey, what's the risk of putting this application in the cloud and then making that determination? Or is the risk more moving everything to the cloud and assessing that risk? How are you compartmentalizing the risk?
It's a multifaceted thing, Eli, right? In my opinion, because it's a function of clients broader strategy. Do they have a top down commitment on this, right? Any program that they're going to do, right? So there are those kind of qualitative risks. It's hard to quantify them, right? Then there are, the bottoms up is really what you are talking about, right? Application level risks, right? It could be technology, it could be this. Then there is the element of the risk of skills, right? And I keep sort of stressing on that, right? Because uh, with evolution of technology and lots of new things coming, that's also becoming an important aspect. I think cost control is another big risk, right? If you don't have a view of what your costs are, right, that is, I would say, is a big risk in itself, right? Because a lot of times when we get into discussions, we don't have that insight that is available, right? And that itself is a red flag to us, that if we can't figure out what my current spend is at an application or a workload level, my ability to actually then sort of forecast that if you move to cloud, for example, or if you move from one space to the other one, what is your spend going to be? So those are the kind of things I would probably say. It's a broad spectrum of risk, sort of
Are
management.
are you are you guys doing a lot of engagements in terms of trying to figure out what the existing ballpark cost is before you can compare it to cloud? Is that even is that conversation still happening, or has it become obvious that, hey, unless you're getting rid of the data center completely, there's no point in comparing, because you're going to increase cost. I mean, you're adding something and you're not really removing something. The data center's staying. I'm just going to reduce the footprint. So, but are you still having engagements where customer are like, hey, I'd like to know what the cost of per VM is on-prem?
So, Eli, I think the cost is always going to be a factor, right? I agree with you, right? That most clients have sort of understood that this is something which is a given, right? They will have to spend in larger workloads and bigger scenarios. Yeah, I mean, if you move out of the data center, then that's great. But moving out of the data center is also not a very easy sort of conversation. But but even otherwise, um, most clients that I am seeing are definitely doing a cost benefit analysis as well. It could be negative cost at the end of the day, and they still take a decision that I am sort of, I know I'm sort of spending more here, but and I'll still go ahead with that decision. But they are wanting to sort of get that view. So yes, I mean, every every second client that I'm working with, I think we are seeing that they want a TCO, ROI benefit, business benefit. I mean, we're calling it different names, right,
Sure,
for
sure.
different situations, but that is a big component for every conversation.
So before I ask you my last question on AI and Gen AI, um, what did I miss? Is there something that you feel our viewers, our listeners should know, whether it's about VMware Broadcom, whether it's about hybrid multi-cloud, hybrid virtualization, hybrid multivisor, let's call it, or any kind of lessons learned, cloud transformation? Did we miss anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think we've covered everything. I guess the summary of all of this is really about, uh, from an industry perspective, I think this is just one more trigger in the industry that is causing a very different sort of wave, right? I think it helps Broadcom, VMware as entities, because obviously they are going to end up becoming more profitable in terms of the overall sort of pattern, if you see. I also believe it is helping their competitors as well, right? Including entities like Nutanix and others, right? Because I believe the what was really seen as a low value, low margin area, right, below the stack, sort of infrastructure level thing, has suddenly sort of become such a hot topic, right? That both vendors as well as product owners will probably sort of find that there is a differentiation that they can start creating here, and that's, I think, an opportunity for everybody.
uh, Before I ask you the last question, another question popped into my mind. So, as you're doing an assessment to help customers figure out where they should go, whether it's Nutanix or Redshift or cloud or OpenShift, AWS is on my mind, OpenShift, Nutanix, Dell, whatever, or the cloud. Does IBM Consulting usually do kind of a feature assessment of what the customer is currently using from a VMware platform perspective today, to try to figure out if even the other solutions have those options? Like, would you say, hey, you're using all of these things from VMware, but Nutanix only have 3 of them, so we recommend going, and I'm just making hypothetical here, we recommend going to AWS because, well, AWS will give you all 5 checks instead of all 3. Is that an exercise that happens?
Yes, that's a very important aspect, right? Because I think for everyone who's worked with VMware, and you'll appreciate this, right? The VMware has a rich array of products, right,
Oh,
which
yes.
covers across the stack, right? And because of their VCF price licensing model, right, because it's now all clubbed in, right? While a lot of focus is really on the virtualization layer, right? Uh, you know, it's across the stack, right? They have cloud health, right? And we are also
Oh,
talking
yes.
about Aptio and Turbonomics, right, as our products, right, as potential alternatives, right, or options. Then there is this whole Tanzu sort of and the container piece, right? Uh, Pivotal Cloud Foundry is sort of still kind of being talked about, right? In many clients have that. So it's really doing a fit gap analysis of sorts of
Mhm.
your target model needs to be preferably about you're not kind of spreading yourselves too thin, again, from a risk perspective, right? Because a lot of what you're doing with VMware today should not now suddenly be I have like 50 other options that I'm using, because you're going to run the risk of increasing your tech debt, your potential license costs, and the risk of even uh, a similar situation happening with other providers that you go to if you've not done your due diligence enough, right? So just a technical fit gap analysis is not sufficient. It's also about, again, without naming some of these alternatives, clients have also said, you know, one of the alternatives that we've talked about here in this discussion also, right, is a $10 billion company. VMware was a $50 billion company, right? If that could get acquired, what if 6 months down the line somebody acquires this entity, and I'm back in the same situation that I am? So hedging
A
your
very
risk,
good point.
right? So,
Very
so
good point.
some of those things are also important
Um,
considerations.
how long does this engagement usually take? The initial assessment, you're calling it a fit gap assessment, that initial assessment to understand kind of the landscape and give them options. Is that a 2-week engagement, 1-month engagement, 6 months engagement? How long roughly?
So the early assessment, and we call it a rapid assessment, right? And with a proper TCO analysis and business case that the client can actually take forward for execution and approvals, we typically do it in 3 weeks time.
3 weeks. Oh, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
And then obviously the execution and all
That's different. Yeah.
is something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, is AI going to eliminate consulting? I hear a lot of folks now saying, "Hey, pretty soon with Gen AI and with AI, and as these models become a little more interesting, and as a lot of these software makers also incorporate Gen AI, and Gen AI can talk to other Gen AIs, it will significantly impact the role of consulting." I disagree personally, because I was a consultant for a very long time, so I can appreciate the hard work that I used to do for customers. But I wanted your perspective as far as, do you feel AI at some point might take away some of either the advice, the assessment, or the role that consulting brings to the table?
So, Eli, I think this is a very common topic of discussion right now. My view, and I think it's a view that I feel everyone is sort of adhering to, right? And we are, as I told you about the factory model with assets and assistants, we don't think consulting is going anywhere, right? As in the consulting or services industry is going to go very. In fact, what AI and Gen AI is doing is improving the quality and the value that clients will get out of this, right? Because of what avenues GenAI is opening for us, right? And there is going to be a shift of um, just as we have been talking about, the workloads moving from one to the other, right? I think it's about skills moving from one place to the other, right? There are some skills that we will actually lean in more towards GenAI as this answer for everything, right? And automate it. And that's where our model of consulting as code within IBM Consulting that we're talking as the next era of IBM Consulting is, we believe we are one of the thought leaders and early adopters of that space, where we are recognizing the fact that Gen AI will bring in a lot of fundamental shifts to the business, right? We are geared up for that. Over the last 3-4 quarters we've been investing heavily on that, and now we are actually in a stage where we've already started launching this. So to your point, right, we typically take this sort of whole example, a VMware migration. If someone comes to me today, what I was doing 6 months back, I can actually do it 25% cheaper for the client, right? And at the same point of time, make sure that we are showing value, and it's because it's not just a cost play, right? And that value is really because I do it faster, right? I show productivity benefits. And the client example I was giving you, where I spoke about how the first 9 months they want us to sort of take the lead, and then the next 9 months they will sort of do it, is only because they have appreciated our model of adopting assets and assistants, right? They want their team to also sort of adopt and apply that. And I guess gradually that's where we'll sort of move towards, right? A lot of the change management that we are already incorporating within our own organization is about how do you shift from the mindset that it is not going to be a heavy labor centric model. I think the other big thing is clients who have a T&M rate card approach, right? Procurement driven. We are also sort of targeting them to say, I could give you a similar model which is better outcome because I have assets and assistants that you should use within your rate card construct, and that gives you better value, that gives you sort of lower price point for the same outcomes or better outcomes that you're going to get to. So that's how I see this sort of shifting.
Vikas, this has been a very, very enlightening podcast. I really appreciate all the insights. I appreciate you sharing kind of what you're seeing out there, what customers are doing, what are the options that they're using, how you can potentially help them, and some of the methodologies that you use. I really appreciate it. This was timely. Like I said, I'll link to the video I did on the VMware Broadcom acquisition, and I got so much stuff on that. So I'm hoping this answers a little bit of it. Hopefully, now that things, like we said earlier, have maybe calmed down a little bit, people are able to think a little more clearly of what they want to do. But in the end, I sincerely want to thank you for making time to join me for this podcast.
Thank you, Eli, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Take care now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.